Regaining Dignity, a Dignity Renaissance. This is a contribution to the 25th Annual Conference of Human Dignity and Humiliation Studies that took place in Kigali, Rwanda, from the 2nd to the 5th of June 2015. This presentation was prepared for the 4th of June, yet due to time constraints it could not be shared, and is being shared now on the 30th of June. Please note that you can find the link to this presentation on www.humiliationstudies.org, and you can find many more introductory lectures on dignity and humiliation on that website. My name is Evelin Lindner. I'm the founding president of the Human Dignity and Humiliation Studies Network. I would like to welcome you to this sharing of thoughts and reflections and insights. It is quite important for me that I make everybody aware that I wear two hats. The hat on the left side is my hat as a nurturer of our global dignity family and movement. The hat on the right side signifies that I am also a researcher in my own right. What is important is that all those who are part of our global family, dignity family, I would want you to feel inspired by my research. Please do not believe what I say. Feel inspired by what I say to find your own path into research and understanding of dignity and humiliation. This manifests the motto of our work, namely unity in diversity. As a researcher, I am part of the rich diversity of research approaches in our network. I'm only one among others, and you are others enriching this diversity. And we are unified by our shared wish to bring more dignity into this world and diminish humiliation. This 25th annual Dignity Conference was dedicated to the life and death of Felicitas Yakka. She gave her life in 1994 for her Tutsi sisters. She did not want to be saved. She chose to die together with them. Nelson Mandela is another of my models. Like Felicitas, I dedicate my entire life to love, to unconditional love of our human family. Every minute, every second of my life is oriented or is guided by that goal. And where does this motivation come from? It comes from my family's traumatic experience of war and genocide. This is the map of Europe. It's a battlefield in the Second World War. And here you see how my father came out of this battlefield. He's missing one arm. This is, I think, in 1955. I was born 1 year before that, or a little bit, maybe a little bit later. So you see me here with my dear beloved father. From this experience of war and displacement, my life has become a project, a mission, rather than a so-called normal life. It has become a mission for never again war, mass killing, genocide. And in order to serve that goal, I began to live globally at the age of 20. I'm 61 now. So the past 40 years, I have really become a global citizen. In practice, I'm at home on all continents. And from this experience, I have kind of gathered, or it has emerged, a bird's eye perspective on humankind's journey on our planet, a kind of astronaut's view. And I like to recommend the Bradshaw Foundation's website, where you can see the journey that we Homo sapiens took from Africa, starting from Africa, something like 200,000, 150,000 years ago. We started in Africa, and then we at some point began to cross over, and we first populated the coastlines. At a later point, we went into the continents, and then about 70,000 years ago, there was a big explosion of Mount Toba in Sumatra, which had a big impact on it, of all life on Earth. And at the end, we also found the Americas. And from this map here, you can see that somehow the party was over something like 10,000, 12,000 years ago. Until that point, we happily populated the planet, always going to the next valley, finding, you know, wild food. And it seems as if this party at some point was over. And when we look at that map, we understand that the easily inhabitable spaces on Earth had been found and had been populated. And we can easily imagine that at some point it must have happened that you couldn't just go to the next valley and find it untouched, abundant wild food. No, perhaps there were other people already. At some point this must have occurred more and more. Why? Because the planet is finite in size. If the planet were much larger, we were perhaps still wondering happily about, believing that the planet is infinite in size. Yet we somehow hit the border, the limits of planet Earth's surface, something you could say about 10,000 years ago. And this was a major, major turning point for us. I would say the last 5% of our history is completely different as compared to the first 95%, within which we, our bodies and souls developed. So the past 10% or 5%, past 10,000 years, 12,000 years are profoundly different, because it is a very different experience to wander happily about and always think that there are more valleys that will wait to be detected, to be inhabited, and the new experience of a win-lose situation where you had to stay put. William Ury wrote a book that I really very much recommend, Getting to Peace, in 1999. He is an anthropologist, and he describes that in his book very well. So for the first 95%, we were mobile, and we simply had to go into nature and take what was there. And then about 10,000, 12,000 years ago, something dramatic happened. We started to hit the limitness, the finiteness of our planet. Other things also changed. Climate changed, and we had already understood how to carry out agriculture. But at that moment, agriculture was implemented systematically. We stayed where we were, when we could not go to the next valley, so to speak. and we try to get more resources out of where we were, which is complex agriculture. It's called intensification. And the sudden onset of limits, anthropologists call circumscription, limits. Planet Earth's surface is limited. Today, we live in the transition, in a second turning point that is as important and crucial as the one 10,000 years ago. We live here at this point now, and we need to profoundly rethink our adaptations that we learned here. What did we learn here? We have to ask ourselves, what do we have to learn here if we want to develop what William Ury calls a global knowledge society? A global knowledge society can become brutally oppressive. It can be a global dictatorship. Do we want that? If we want to have a dignified future, global knowledge that serves the dignity of all of us, then I think we have to really rethink what we learned here and learn something profoundly new now. I often use another way of illustrating what this message, and imagine you respect yourself to a certain extent and you respect the other person in front of you just equally much. You feel or you sense, according to you, you are both equally worthy as human beings. There is a German word, auf gleicher Augenhöhe. You are on the same line, the equal of equality in worthiness. And if we assume that this was the foundation of the culture until about 10,000 years ago, for the first 95% of our history, then we know that this changed profoundly after that. And what is this treating each other as equal in worthiness? What does this mean? It is a dialogical approach. Riane Eisler, a social activist and researcher, calls it the partnership model of society. I often use the lying 8, the infinity symbol, the Möbius strip that you see on the upper left corner. It is also a symbol for unity in diversity. It's a symbol for non-dualism. Why? Imagine you are the person, the circle on the left side, and another person is the circle on the right side, and you hold each other by your hands and you cross over. Then you are connected, you are united, yet you are not uniform. You are two. You stay in the two and you are one. But you stay two. And I don't want to say that the first 95% of our history was just a paradise without conflict. I don't, the aim is not to idealize that time. We lived in small groups. The population of the planet was not big, and there were dangerous animals threatening. The weather, was uncontrollable. So and there was conflict and there was perhaps killing. Yet what there was seemingly not yet was systematic war. So about 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, this first turning point that I described happened. And what did we as a human family do? We adapted, as I said, by staying put, developing agriculture, complex agriculture that we had learned before but made it systematic. And this entailed that we also developed so-called dominator societies, as Riane Eisler would call it. No longer were all people equal in worthiness. No, there were now higher beings presiding over lower beings. masters presiding over underlings, inferiors, subordinates, slaves. So a gradient of power, of inequality was erected. This is what we did and what happened almost everywhere on the planet in a very short time. And you can understand why. If you are on one territory and you are afraid that the people in the neighboring valley might steal from you what you have planted in spring and you want to harvest in autumn. What if they come and plunder and take everything? You want to guard yourself. So you you have a strong leader and you send your young men to the border to guard it. You get perhaps weapons to defend yourself. And the other side, the people in the other valley, they get afraid. They get weapons too. And so you live in a continuous arms race and fear of war and kind of atmosphere of terror where you want to have a strong leader and a strong leader wants to have underlings who follow, and strong leaders might be benevolent, however they might also not be benevolent. And included here is that those at the top acquired the duty to humiliate their subordinates routinely in order to keep that hierarchy in place. It was seen as divinely ordained and as nature's order and as the model of civilization. Now, when we speak about the great civilizations emerging at some point in the past, Mesopotamia, Egypt, they were all hierarchical and they despised egalitarian structures. For them, hierarchy was the same as civilization. So a leader had the duty to routinely humiliate underlings, and it could be kind of mild seating orders, or that the emperor always had to have his head higher than his subordinates. You have that in Japan, in China, even here in Africa, where I'm speaking now. People of lower rank would try to keep their heads lower than those of higher rank. But it could also mean routine torture, routine killing, routine cruelty and brutality. And even the father of the house, the pater familias, had the duty to punish his disobedient wife and children. They were part of what he owned. He owned the domesticated animals and the inferiors. And so you could say what humankind, what we learned in the first 95% of our history, we kind of expanded it, intensified it there. We had learned agriculture, we knew how to plant and to harvest, but it was not necessary as long as there was abundant wild food. And we learned to make tools. We started with the idea that something can be dominated. Stones were made into tools, bones. Language is kind of domination. You put words on something. And now this idea that something can be dominated was expanded. Not only were stones and bones made into tools, no. Animals were made into tools and other human beings were made into tools. And all that was regarded as profoundly useful and as the characteristic of civilization. And in that context, the wife who was beaten, or the children or the slaves that were punished, their duty was to swallow that punishment and to learn humility. Humiliation was seen as a pro-social tool to teach underlings their due lowly place. There was a time 700 years BE when there were two kings in France. They were called the lazy kings, les rois fainéants. Why? Because they had neglected that duty of keeping underlings down, and they were toppled. So as a master, as an overlord, you had no choice. You were toppled if you didn't do that work of humiliation. The only people who could get angry and didn't have to swallow humiliation quietly were, you could see, the aristocrats among themselves, equals. An aristocrat, if his honor was attacked, he could defend it in a duel. He could go to duel. So if we see here also why I call this period in human history, the past 10,000 years roughly, the period of honor, of ranked honor, where those at the top have more honor and those at the bottom have less honor. But everybody has some honor. Even the slave who is working in the castle of the king will feel that he has more honor than the slave working in the quarries. So it's the universe, the moral universe of ranked honor. And as I said, an aristocrat can get angry and can defend his humiliated honor in a duel. As I said, a wife will not be able to go to duel against her husband if he beats her. I call the first period, the 95% of first 95% of our history, the period of pride, of pristine pride, where people had not yet experienced this kind of humiliation, systematic humiliation. They were still untouched, and they had this equality that was kind of self-evident. They had not yet learned that this can be different. And now comes the turning point where we are part of now. The generation that is alive now on planet Earth carries a responsibility that is greater than any other generation ever carried in human history, says physicist Michio Kaku, and I agree. Why? Because we need to carry out in a beneficial, in a constructive way, together, the dismantling of this ranked honor universe of the past 10,000 years. What you see here is the core of the human rights ideal of every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. If you go back, here this sentence would be absurd. Here this sentence would go as follows. Every human being is born unequal in dignity and rights, or in worthiness, in honor and rights, and some are freer than others. Interestingly, this kind of U-turn, normative U-turn that you see here, that humankind has started, has a historic marker in linguistics. In the English language, in 1757, for the first time, the verb to humiliate means to violate the dignity of a person. It becomes antisocial. Before, humbling and humiliating was good. It was the duty of the master to do, to show their underlings their due lowly place. Now, it's no longer pro-social. What stays pro-social is humility. So humiliation and humility separate. One becomes antisocial, the other stays pro-social. 1757, in the English language. If we look at that year, then we see it's just prior to the French Revolution, prior to the signing of the American Declaration of Independence. It's the start of the movement that led to the adoption of the Human Rights Convention in 1948 in Paris. So in a way, it is as if humankind says, look, in the past 10,000 years, we turned human beings into tools. And we don't think anymore that this is good to do. We are all equal. This was an idea that others had before. Many founders of religions thought that, Jesus went to a prostitute, showing that she was a human being of equal worthiness. The Sikh religion, Islam, has a lot of messages of equality in worthiness. However, as soon as these religions were institutionalized, they were co-opted by the context within which they were, namely a dominator context, and they became hierarchical. And the mission of equality in worthiness saw a mission creep towards inequality in worthiness, adapted to the environment in a way, to the context. And today, I would say that for the first time in human history, we have a real chance to change that context. As we see, changing a niche is not enough. The niche will be co-opted quite soon. What we need is to change the entire context so that it no longer can co-opt this message of equality and dignity. So what you see here is the future, a dignified future for humankind, that we together take care of each other in a dialogical way. You see the infinity symbol there, and we take care of our planet together as good stewards. Let us take the example of Nelson Mandela. He was born in the lower left corner as an underling in the black community of the apartheid South Africa. He went to the masters, the white masters in the upper left corner, and he said, look, times have changed. No longer are you justified in arrogating superiority. This was acceptable in the past, perhaps now it is no longer acceptable. Please, come down, humble yourself. Don't cry humiliation. It's not a violation, it's an invitation to join everybody else at the line of equality of dignity, where we all share humility and take care of a dignified future together. And then Nelson Mandela went to the sisters and brothers, the black sisters and brothers, and he said, look, before only the masters could cry humiliation and get angry when their honor was humiliated and attacked and violated, and they could go and defend it. Now I bring you this right. You no longer have to accept quietly to be worth less. Now you can learn from me that it is a violation of your human rights, and that you have a right to get angry, that you have a right to rise up. I empower you. Human rights ideals empower you. And now comes something that all human rights activists should be extremely aware of. Teaching millions of people who before accepted lowliness quietly, and even if it was painful, it was like an earthquake or something, like, that hurts, but it's unavoidable and it's God's will. As long as you think that being at the bottom of a hierarchy is God's will, you will not get angry. But as soon as you learn it's a violation of my dignity, and then you learn, and there are those who perpetrate it, let's go and kill them all. This is the danger in making people angry who were not angry before. We see it here in Rwanda. The word Hutu means servant in the local language. It means these people had their place somewhere down in the hierarchy, and this was accepted by everybody. And now, at some point, they learned that this was a violation and they became angry. And they did not stop in the middle at the line of equality and dignity and invited their former master into building a new future, dignified future together. No, they rose up, and they attempted to kill their former master. My third book is on big love, and Desmond Tutu kindly contributed with a foreword where you can read the following. The white people in South Africa do not know how lucky they are. Because if Nelson Mandela had said in 1994 to his black brothers and sisters, take your machetes, take your knives, take your hammers, go to your white neighbors and kill them all, they might have done it. And he did not do that. So here we see the big lesson for human rights idealists and advocates and defenders. Be very careful when you empower people. Very careful. Be very careful because it can go too far. You have to avoid the path of Hitler, the path of in Rwanda. You have to avoid the path of terrorism. You have to also guide it toward a path of Nelson Mandela. So here you see also why this so-called self-esteem movement that we see, particularly in the United States, is now highly criticized, because the result is a society of narcissistic, egotistical, ruthless individualists who have forgotten collective solidarity for the common good. In 2007, we had the Dignity Conference in Hangzhou in China, and a professor from Shanghai, originally I think from Germany or England, he said, for years and years I have empowered my Chinese students. And what was the result? They became nasty people. So he decided no longer to use the word empowerment, he uses the word entrustment. And I follow him there. I no longer use the word empowering. I use the word entrusting, because it entails also responsibility. So this is a very, very important lesson, I think. Feelings of humiliation can only be healed by following the path of Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. Perpetrators of violence and genocide humiliate also themselves when they continue with cycles of humiliation. Here you see, I'm born in Germany, and what was the result of Hitler's narrative of humiliation, where he said that killing the Jews, who he feared would want to humiliate and dominate the rest in the future, he said that killing them all is a solution. It was called Endlösung. So he went to perpetrate a Holocaust, and he went to war and saw that as a solution. It was called solution. And what was the result? It was a suicidal solution apart from being a homicidal solution. So it's not a solution, it's a suicide. It's a dehumanization of those who do it. So this narrative of, preventing feared future humiliation by genocide, this narrative was also used in Rwanda, and it's a suicidal narrative. Earlier I tried to describe what happens when two people, people living in adjacent valleys, getting afraid of each other, that one will plunder the other and attack and conquer and enslave the other. What they live in continuous fear, and they accumulate weapons. There's a weapons, an armament race, and that leads almost automatically to war. And political scientists, they call that the security dilemma. It's a tragic dilemma. Nobody can escape from it. The motto is, if you want peace, prepare for war. And even the most peaceable leader cannot escape from that motto. And it leads ultimately always to war, rather than to what is intended, namely peace. You see here the map of Europe in the 30 Years' War, and you see how fragmented, divided it is. The red parts show those areas where more than 50% of the population were killed. The triangles you see at the bottom here, they signify a dominator society. So this was the atmosphere, the context within which everybody on this planet lived, almost everybody. They all were afraid of their neighboring dominator societies. Sometimes they were friends, but you know, friendship was very fragile. Within a day, it could change, and you could be surprised. I'm very often in Norway. I really cherish its cultural heritage of equality in dignity and solidarity and global responsibility. And Norway experienced this suddenly, and they were completely unprepared. Hitler sent warships, and he occupied Norway. Just like that, from one day to the other, they lost their freedom. And this is not long ago. So people lived in fear, and the security dilemma had perhaps its last very strong manifestation in the Cold War. And as we all know, we all fear that today, with the Ukraine crisis, the security dilemma, instead of being attenuated, will be re-instigated. Always there are some people who profit from a strong security dilemma. Not least the industry that produces weapons, and there are always interests to instigate, to start the security dilemma, even though, and this is what is so revolutionary and what most people don't understand, to what I see around the globe, even the most enlightened people seem to kind of overlook the novelty of the historic situation in which humankind finds itself. Look at that picture of the blue planet. This was a picture our forefathers could not see. The founders of our religions, of our philosophies, could not see that. This is a profoundly new image, which somehow shows that we, for the first time in human history, can grasp that we are one family on one planet, tiny planet, that it's absurd to have these borders and wars, that we together have to take care and be stewards of this planet. And only if we manifest this insight and this reality of interdependence, of being one family, then we can escape from this security dilemma. We can make it go away, and we can manifest what Gandhi said: there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. As I said before, the security dilemma plays out at frontiers, at borders, between groups that do not trust each other really, and do not know each other enough to trust each other. At the moment, I think this border goes between the so-called 1% and 99% and the rest. There is a gap between those two groups, and there is a kind of security dilemma going on between them. What you see here is a picture from 2011 in December at Zuccotti Park, the gathering point of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And if you look at the motto here, if you want peace, prepare for war, I think the motto for those who want to acquire wealth is, if you want wealth, exploit the rest. And this is a new manifestation of the dominator culture, of the dominator spirit that brought us colonization, that brought us the exploitation of the resources of the planet. that brought us the destruction of the social cohesion in this world, in societies. And it is no longer that the dominator spirit is expressed in only colonizing faraway countries. No, the dominator spirit plays out now everywhere in the world. So before certain countries were colonized, now everybody's being colonized in a way. This is what I observe when I live globally on all continents. And again, we have to be aware, if we continue with that, we will lose every hope to be able to nurture and to develop further democracy, for example. Louise Brandeis said, we may have democracy or we may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. So if we continue like that, we will be rather suicidal as humanity as a whole. The 1% even risks their own existence in the long run and their children's existence. When I give talks, share my insights in certain segments of societies, for example in South America, and I use the word capitalism, I might be thrown out of the room. When I do that in context, conservative context, for example in the United States, and use the word socialism or communism, then I might be thrown out there. Why? Because these terms, they have now become markers of cycles of humiliation. Still from the Cold War, those who get angry about these words, they are the ones who normally don't know anymore what this terminology really means. What is capitalism, socialism, communism? They don't know. It's simply a kind of enemy, word for an enemy. And you see from the two pictures at the top that the result that both produced, all the systems produced so far, is inequality, exploitation, domination. It's always the dominator spirit that is expressed, manifested, whatever system. So you see on the upper left side, North Korea, you see a small elite above the rest. And on the right side, you see Morumba in Sao Paulo, where I was in 2012. You see on the right side of that picture, you see the wealthy in their high-rise building overlooking the rest. And we all know that inequality is on the rise everywhere on our planet, within and countries and between countries. And the result of this plunder, this dominator spirit ravaging like a predator all resources, is that social and ecological deserts are left behind. We can call it ecocide and sociocide. Therefore, it is so important to listen to the experience of Rwanda, where a genocide has just happened and society tries to live with it, to live with the trauma, to overcome the trauma. We as a global society, we have now the challenge of sociocide, of ecocide. So let us learn from the experience in Rwanda in that respect. We have to learn to live together. We have to learn to do other things than exploiting the planet, as the picture further down shows. You have to really get aware that the Cree prophecy is true. When all the trees have been cut down, when all the animals have been hunted, when all the waters are polluted, when all the air is unsafe to breathe, only then will you discover you cannot eat money. So in that context, we have to understand what success is. What is success? Is winning in a casino a successful, sustainable strategy? I would say no. But this is what we think is success today. And this is a suicidal belief. So let us look at a study that was carried out in the UK in 2009. An elite city banker who earns £1 million plus bonuses destroys £7 of value for every £1 he creates. Then the other side. Hospital cleaners create over £10 in value for every £1 they receive in pay. Back to the first side. Advertising executives destroy £11 of value for every £1 created. Back to the second side. Child care workers generate between £7 and £9.50 for every £1 they are paid. Back to the first side. Tax accountants destroy £47 for every £1 they create. And back to the good side, the sustainable side. Waste recycling workers generate £12 for every £1 spent on their wages. The previous example showed the plunder of our planet. Now I want you to see the plunder of our social cohesion in societies. What is it that we sell the bodies of women for profit? What does it do with society? This is only one little tiny example. I wrote a book, A Dignity Economy, that came out in our Dignity Press, in our World Dignity University Press in 2012. I wrote a chapter on how trust is eroded by the profit maximization spirit. I must admit to you, wherever I pass in front of kiosks where such magazines as you see them at the bottom here are displayed, I feel profoundly humiliated by that. I feel that my humanity is violated. I feel very sad. And I don't want to be part of this world that humiliates women and me in that way. So let us again go back to this presentation of human history, and we see that in the first 95% of our history, or even 99%, depends on how we calculate, we expanded horizontally. We always happily wandered into the next valley, and if there was a group that was getting bigger, we lived in groups between perhaps 150 to 250 people at that time. When one group got bigger, it split, and one part wandered further, and we lived in rather egalitarian social structures, which, as I said before, doesn't mean that it was paradise, yet it still lacked the deep hierarchy that came later, that came when circumscription hit us as a human family, namely the fact, we could say, that the surface of the planet is finite. And then we developed the dominator spirit, the dominator approach, which is a kind of vertical expansion, we could say. Today we live again in a similarly radically dramatic time as about 12,000 years ago. Again, we experience circumscription. Circumscription means that something we thought before was unlimited, suddenly we understand it is limited. Today we understand clean water, clean air, minerals, all that is limited. We cannot throw away all our waste into the planet's ecosphere and expect that it will be swallowed there without any harm. We cannot extract all the minerals, all the resources, and exploit our planet in the way we do. So what do we have to do in that situation? You see here a curve. It's an exponential growth curve. When you hear the news that what will save us is economic growth, then it's exponential growth. It's, I think you don't see it on the right side because it should be going up further there. And we all understand that, unending exponential growth is not possible in a limited context. And, we understand that if our child is 16 years old and it has finished growing, we don't ask this child to grow further. Or when you go to a concert, you don't ask the musicians to play faster so that you can go home quicker. So in our limited context, to strive for unlimited growth is an absurdity, and it leads to what we see now, conflict between ourselves, when we compete for domination, when we compete for domination of planet Earth, of its resources, and of each other. So what do we have to learn? We have to learn to live in cycles and to learn to, to reinvigorate the spirit of the first 95% of our history, which is also embedded into our bodies and souls. We are not adapted to the past 5%, really. We are able, as human beings, to manifest this dignified future. I know that many people here get angry. They say, no, 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 human nature is per definition aggressive, and it's homo dominator, homo economicus, homo amans, the loving human being is a dream. I would be very careful. If it would be so natural, for example, to go into war and kill other people, why do our veterans come back traumatized? How come? It should be natural for them. No, it's not natural for them. For us, human beings, we are not adapted really to the past 10% of 5% of our history. It was a mutilating, a handicapping time. I sometimes use the image of the foot binding for Chinese women that was prevalent for 1,000 years until it was forbidden. Now, this is, for me, a kind of illustration of the past 5% of human culture. It was a handicapping, mutilating time. And we have to liberate ourselves now if we want to survive in a dignified way on our planet, I would say. And many would say it's not possible, we can't do it. Everything points into the contrary direction. I agree. Everything, we are still we are all socialized into the dominator culture, and it is not easy to do something different. However, as I said before, there is a window of opportunity, and some people say it will stay open for another 30 years, perhaps not, perhaps even 100 years, I don't know, but there is a window of opportunity now. Why? Because never before have we seen the blue planet, never before have we had as much knowledge as now. We have all the necessary knowledge to turn around and to develop a culture of dignity for the future. We have the chance that we never had before. Therefore, I say with Michio Kaku that the generation alive now has more responsibility than any generation before. I recommend to look at the anthropologist Alan Page Fisker's relational models theory. He found out that people relate to each other in just 4 ways. Communal sharing, what we have in common. This is what we see in families. Everybody gives what she can, and everybody receives what she needs. The baby doesn't have to earn her living, the grandmother not. It's also the arena of the African Ubuntu philosophy. It's the awareness that I am because of you. We are because of each other. It's the awareness of interdependence, of solidarity, of being stewards of the common good. Then we see authority ranking. It's ordered differences. It's already narrower approach to collaborating. It can be the good parent, the benevolent leader. It can also be the abusive dictator. You see that authority ranking is needed in a plane. Imagine a plane and the pilot sitting in front and steering the plane. You know, a plane should not be steered democratically. The pilots should not go to the passengers and ask them how a plane should be flown. They are the experts on the plane. And what is benevolent is if they respect that the passengers are equal in worthiness and dignity, even though they are ignorant of flying a plane. What would be abusive would be if the pilots regard the passengers as lesser beings and treat them as such. So this is the difference there. So today, if we talk about equality and dignity, it doesn't mean that there is no hierarchy anymore. Yes, we still need hierarchy. However, we have to be careful to avoid ranking the essence of the worthiness of people. And of course, we need to be careful with animals, with our biosphere and ecosphere. You know, also they have a certain equality in worthiness. And you know, it's a long discussion, yet I would also include very much animals here. So equality matching is an additive imbalance. It's even narrower. You know, it means I take care of your cat, you take care of my plants and water them. Then we have market pricing. It's a ratio. So from the top to the bottom, the approach is increasingly narrow. And what we see here is that we as society, global society, we have done something that is destructive. We have put the narrowest approach to collaboration, namely market pricing, and have given it primacy. No wonder that now, you know, people could sell their grandmother. You sell out when you put market pricing as the guiding principle in society and put all the others secondary. You hollow out society. You hollow out everything that makes living valuable and worth living. You hollow out quality of life because you quantify everything into a very narrow calculus. So a dignified future is only reachable, to my view, if we, as a human family, re-emphasize and put into the, you know, as guiding principle of everything we do, communal sharing and benevolent authority ranking. So this really ruthless prioritizing of market pricing has begun 30 years ago perhaps. And what we observe in the wake of that is a mission creep of the concept of dignity. Dignity 1.0 emphasizes the flourishing as the person one is and should become, and helping other persons to do the same. While Dignity 2.0 disregards flourishing in favor of freedom, autonomy, and independence. I think here we come to the point of the title of this sharing, namely a dignity renaissance. I believe we have to go back to Dignity 1.0 now. And has been described, Dignity 1.0 has been described beautifully by a South African theologian Russell Boatman, who was the first black vice-chancellor of Stellenbosch University, he said, "The dignity of human beings emanates from the network of relationships, from being in community. In an African view, it cannot be reduced to a unique, competitive and free personal ego." So, what if we forget all these cycles of humiliation connected to the terminology of communism, capitalism, socialism, and leave it behind and look at dignity? Why not take dignity as a starting point? Dignity means more than peace in a way. Peace can be also the calm and quiet of underlings who have successfully being suppressed. Dignity includes peace that is dialogical between equals. So dignity. Why not say dignityism or dignism? And its motto would be unity in diversity. It would be no longer uniformity in division, no longer uniformity without diversity, no longer division without unity. It would be a new win-win situation for the future. It would mean a world where every newborn finds space and is nurtured to unfold their highest and best, embedded in a social context of loving appreciation and connection. A world where the carrying capacity of the planet guides the ways in which everybody's basic needs are met. A world where we are united in respecting human dignity and celebrating diversity. A world where we prevent unity from being perverted into oppressive uniformity and keep diversity from sliding into hostile division. I think many people, like that ideal. However, even those people who I observe subscribe to that ideal, we all have one step further to do, I would say. We all are socialized into the communication, ways of communicating that are that manifest in a dominator culture, in a war culture. We like to speak fighting against, combating this and that. This is the language, remnants of war language. And if you really want to manifest dignism, then we need to learn to speak differently. We need to learn to replace confrontation with something else, with awe. You might not know what the word means. Many people don't know. It's when you look at a beautiful sunset and you are awed, or you see a child learning how to walk, then you are in awe. I'm in awe at the universe around us that is so much larger than what we can fathom. So I think it is good to replace confrontation with awe for mutually enriching diversity, to be in awe at all the different cultural approaches that we see in this world, all the differences between us, all the biodiversity that we need to protect and rather than exterminate. So be in awe for the diversity around us that enriches us mutually so that unity in diversity can flourish rather than division without unity. Unity in diversity is the motto of the Human Dignity and Humiliation Studies Network, which is a global fellowship, a movement. It's not an organization, it's not an institution, it's a movement of like-minded academics and practitioners working for a new future for humankind, as I said, for new structures rather than against old ones. And we have three orientations or research, education, and developing ideas for action. Here you see some of the 1,000 members of our network. It's upon invitation, and we have about 6,000 addresses in our address list, and our website is visited from 180 countries each year. And you see here in the middle our dear Emmanuel, who was the convener of our 25th annual Dignity Conference here in Kigali, and you see Helene Lewis, who was so kind to be with us, Uli Spalthoff, who was leading many sessions of our conference, and then you see Jean Damascene Gazanabo at the top, and aside from Magnus Hovelsrud, who came from, he's a pillar of peace education. And then you see Linda and Mike, who without them our work would not be there. And Rick Slaven, you see there, who is the husband of Linda. You see many, many, many people. John Braithwaite, you see there, who planned to come and could unfortunately not join us. And we have 2 conferences per year, and you are warmly invited to come. And we have 1 conference always in December in New York. The honorary convener is Morten Deutsch, the father of the field of conflict resolution and social psychology. It is the workshop on transforming humiliation and violent conflict each year in New York. This year it will be from the 3rd to the 4th of December, so please come. And then we have 1 other conference each year outside of the US in a global location. And you see that we had our conference in 2013, and our dear Helene, who was here now, was the convener of that conference. And you see our conference in Berlin 2005, where we had the privilege of the presence of Emmanuel and Jean Damas, and our conference in 2008 in Norway, where we also had our dear Damas with us. And the next conference next year will be in Croatia, in Dubrovnik, and after that in 2017 in India. Here is a group picture of the 2005 conference in Berlin, and you see Emmanuel and Damas there, and you see here Emmanuel and Damas. And then 2013 we were in Stellenbosch. Dear Helene convened us, and you see Uli there, and you see also Emmanuel there. As I said, we are about 1,000 members in our movement, and we encourage everybody who has a guest room to declare their home to be a dialogue home, a dignity home for our network, so that all our members have 1,000 homes all over the planet. These are also my homes. As you know, I live globally, so that I can nurture our global family better. In 2011, we launched the World Dignity University Initiative, where we went back to the original word, Latin word, universitas scholarium, which meant a community of scholars. We are looking for individuals who walk the talk of dignity and who wish to contribute. So our initiative is an invitation to you to help form a global community of educators and learners for whom dignity is central. Everybody is an educator and a learner at the same time. And we are a bit careful of buildings, institutions, disciplines that discipline the scholars perhaps a bit too much. So we rather want to go to the liberating motto of a unity in diversity, and give diversity a place to flourish, united by the shared goal of wanting to bring more dignity into this world. Since 2012, we have Dignity Press, World Dignity University Press, as an imprint, and our dear Linda and Uli have developed it. Uli is almost single-handedly has published 24 books since 2012, of which the book by Father Jean d'Amour on Felicitas Yakka was the most recent book now. I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Please write to me if you wish to have the PDF files, private copies of my book manuscripts. I will send them to you confidentially, and I wish you a very lovely rest of the day.